The laptop was sitting on her desk the way it always was, screen down, charging. Claire had changed the password 3 weeks earlier. I noticed because I tried to use it one afternoon when mine was updating. We'd always known each other's passwords. That was just how we operated. 7 years of that kind of ordinary trust, and the old one didn't work. She said she'd changed it for security reasons. A work thing, she said. IT had sent a notice. I didn't push it. I filed it and moved on. At 1 in the morning, I was sitting in the dark of our shared office, and I opened the laptop and typed a name into the password field. The screen unlocked on the first try. I sat there for a moment with the desktop in front of me and every folder and file she had accessible and waiting, and I didn't open a single one. I didn't need to. The name I'd typed wasn't mine. It wasn't a random string of characters designed for security. It wasn't anything IT had recommended. It was the name of a specific person, someone I knew existed on the edge of her life, someone she'd mentioned in the careful, offhand way people mention things they want to seem unimportant. She had changed her password to his name, and she had done it believing I would never guess it, which meant she had looked at 7 years of knowing me and decided I wasn't paying close enough attention to see what was directly in front of me. She was wrong about that, and now I had to decide what to do with being right. 6 months before the password, everything looked fine. That's the part that stays with you. Not the moment it breaks, but the stretch of time before it where you're living inside something that has already started to go wrong and you can't see it because nothing looks broken from where you're standing. We had our routines. Dinner most nights at the kitchen table, actual plates instead of the couch, which had always mattered to Claire, and so it mattered to me. A joint spreadsheet for the bills, color-coded. I handled the income column. She handled the due dates. Weekends that organize themselves because after 6 years together, you stop needing to negotiate the small stuff. I'm 31, running IT project management for a mid-sized firm. Enough structure in my day that I liked coming home to someone who already knew what kind of quiet I needed. Claire knew. That was the thing about her. Then in early spring, she started going to a new gym. She'd found it through someone in her office. She said, better equipment, better hours. 3 evenings a week instead of her usual 2. I didn't think anything of it. She came home tired in the way people come home tired from a real workout, and I made dinner on those nights, and that was fine. The phone thing started around the same time, though I didn't connect them until later. She started leaving it face down on the counter. Not every time. That's the part that makes you doubt yourself, the inconsistency. Most of the time, it was just her phone sitting there like always. But sometimes it was face down, and sometimes when it lit up, she'd cross the room a little faster than the moment seemed to require. One evening, I picked it up to check the time. My hands were full, and it was the closest screen. She was across the room, and she moved toward me before I'd even looked at it. Said she was waiting on a message from her sister, and she didn't want to miss it. I handed it back. She thanked me and set it face down again. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. People wait on messages from their sisters. The laptop was a Saturday morning in April. We'd shared it for 3 years. Bills, streaming, booking the trip to Portugal we kept planning and not taking. The password was our cat's name and the year we moved in together. The kind of password that made sense to exactly 2 people. I sat down to pay the electric bill and typed it in, and the screen shook and rejected it. I tried it twice more, slower, thinking I mistyped. From the kitchen, Claire called out, without me saying anything. Oh, I changed it. Sorry, I'll log you in when I'm done in here. Casual. Already moving on to the next thing. She came in 10 minutes later, typed the new password with her body angled slightly toward the screen, logged me in, and went back to the kitchen. She never told me what the new password was. Claire had a way of making reasonable questions feel like accusations. I didn't notice it as a pattern at first. I noticed it as a feeling, the slight recalibration I do before asking something simple, the half second where I'd decide whether it was worth a version of events I'd get back. That's not something you name when you're inside it. You just adjust, and the adjusting becomes normal, and after a while you can't remember what it felt like to ask without calculating first. The laptop continued. She'd log me in when I needed it, always doing it herself, always with her body turned slightly toward the screen. I asked her directly one evening what the new password was. She laughed, genuinely, easily, the way she laughed when something struck her as harmless, and said she'd been rotating it every few weeks since she'd read an article about credential security. She said she'd write it down and leave it somewhere we'd both remember. She never wrote it down. I let it go because the explanation was plausible and she delivered it without flinching, and because I'd learned somewhere in 6 years of being with Claire that pressing past her first answer usually cost me more than it gave me. The gym started pulling at me around the same time. The Wednesday and Friday evenings had always been hers, and I'd always respected that. She'd worked hard to build the habit, and I didn't want to be the person who made her feel monitored. But the evenings started running longer. Past 8, then past 9. And she'd come home showered, which made sense, except she wasn't carrying gym clothes, and her hair was dry in a way that didn't match someone who just stepped out of a locker room shower. I asked one Friday how the workout was. Long class, she said. I'm wiped. I asked which class. Spin, she said, opening the fridge. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I looked up the gym schedule on my phone. They didn't offer spin on Wednesdays or Fridays. They offered it on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I put my phone down and didn't do anything with that. I told myself I might have the wrong gym, the wrong schedule page, some explanation that required me to be the one who'd made an error. Brunch that Sunday. 4 of us, me, Claire, our friend Jess, and Jess's husband. Easy morning, good coffee, the kind of weekend that had always felt like the best version of our life. Jess was mid-story about something she'd seen downtown Thursday evening and said she'd spotted Claire outside a restaurant on 5th, waving at her from across the street. I smiled through it the way you smile when you need a second to understand what you just heard. Thursday. Claire had told me she was working late at the office, gala setup, big week. She'd said not to wait up. Jess kept talking. Claire lifted her coffee cup and took a long, slow sip and looked at the table and said nothing. She didn't correct Jess. She didn't acknowledge it. She just waited for the moment to pass. It passed. I changed the subject. Jess moved on. The brunch continued. Claire and I drove home without discussing it, and I sat in the passenger seat looking at the road and understanding, for the first time with any clarity, that I had been collecting these moments for weeks and quietly stacking them somewhere I hadn't been ready to look at directly. I chose a Tuesday evening after dinner, dishes already done, nothing on television. I sat across from Claire at the kitchen table and told her I'd been feeling like something had shifted between us. I kept it open. No accusations, no list of evidence. I wasn't ready for that version of the conversation, and I wasn't sure enough of myself to have it. I just said I'd noticed distance and I wanted to understand it, and that I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just needed us to actually talk. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't realize I was pulling away like that. Work has been a lot, and I think I've been bringing it home in ways I haven't been aware of. You deserve better than that. She said it quietly and mint-sounding, and her thumb moved across my knuckles while she said it, and I felt the specific discomfort of a man who has just been made to feel like his concern was an overreaction and his apology is the next required step. I didn't apologize, but I let it land softer than it should have. For about a week after that, things looked better. She came home at a normal hour twice. She pulled up the Portugal trip on her laptop one evening and said maybe they should actually book it this time, picked dates, looked at flights, made it feel real. She left her phone face up on the coffee table. She made coffee for both of us on Saturday morning without being asked and brought mine to the couch. I started doing what you do when someone gives you a reason to stop worrying. I revised. Maybe the spin class confusion was my error, a different gym branch, an outdated schedule online. Maybe Jess had seen someone who looked like Claire outside that restaurant, someone with the same coat and the same posture, the kind of resemblance that feels certain at a distance and dissolves up close. I wanted to be wrong about this. That's the honest version. Being right about this cost more than being wrong did. The receipt was on a Thursday. I was hanging up Claire's jacket in the front closet. She dropped it on the chair when she came in, and I was tidying without thinking about it. And something slipped out of the pocket. I picked it up from the floor. A restaurant I'd never heard of. Small place. From the look of it, the kind of name that suggested it was trying not to be found. 40 minutes outside the city. 2 entrees. A bottle of wine. The total was the kind of total that belongs to a dinner someone planned. The date was a Tuesday. 3 weeks ago. Claire had told me that Tuesday she had a team dinner for a colleague who was leaving the office. I stood in the front hallway holding the receipt. Then I took a photo of it with my phone, put it back in the pocket exactly as I found it, and hung the jacket up. I went back to the living room where Claire was watching something on television, and I sat down next to her, and I watched the screen without seeing it, and she leaned against me the way she always did, and neither of us said anything. I didn't bring up the receipt. I told myself it was because I wasn't ready, that I needed more before I turned our lives upside down on the basis of a dinner bill and a gym schedule and a name I'd overheard. That was part of it. The other part was that I'd watched Claire take my hand across the kitchen table and deliver an apology so clean and warm that I'd almost felt guilty for needing it, and I wasn't sure I trusted myself in another version of that conversation. So instead, I started listening differently. About a week after the receipt, Claire mentioned a new colleague at dinner. Someone brought in to help coordinate a major fundraising event her organization was running. She said the name once, briefly, the way you'd mention anyone peripheral. Eli's handling the venue side, which take a lot off my plate, and then move straight to something else, the food, the week ahead, anything. I let it pass. 3 days later, I was in the hallway when she was on the phone with her sister. I wasn't trying to listen. I was walking past. But I caught the name again, Eli. And then her voice shifted register slightly, the way it does when she's redirecting, and she said something about the event running long and changed the subject. Twice in 1 week. Casual both times. Followed immediately by a turn away from it. That weekend, I opened my laptop and went to the nonprofit's website. I went through the staff page twice. No Eli. I checked their social media, event photos, volunteer tags, donor posts going back 4 months. Nothing. I went to LinkedIn and searched every combination I could think of. No one named Eli with any verifiable connection to Claire's organization in this city. The name had no professional footprint. It existed only in her mouth, in passing, attached to nothing I could locate. I closed the laptop and sat at the kitchen table in the dark for a while. And then something else came in, quieter and less comfortable than suspicion. I thought about what I was actually doing. I was searching LinkedIn at midnight. I had a photograph of a receipt on my phone that I'd taken in secret and put back so she wouldn't know I'd found it. I was cataloging the direction her phone faced on the counter. I was cross-referencing gym schedules. If Claire had found out what I'd been doing, she would have looked at me with that measured, reasonable expression and said something that made all of it sound like the behavior of a man who didn't trust her, and she would not have been entirely wrong. I thought about deleting the receipt photo, starting over, treating the Portugal trip planning as the real signal and everything else as noise I'd generated myself. I thought about what it meant that I'd become someone who needed to verify her stories rather than just hear them. The doubt wasn't about Claire. It was about me. Whether I was seeing something true or building something from pieces that didn't actually connect, because some part of me was already looking for an exit and needed a reason. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't delete the photo, but I didn't stop questioning whether I should have. I made a decision on a Wednesday morning before Claire was awake. I was going to let it go. Not because I'd convinced myself there was nothing there. I hadn't. But because I'd spent weeks living inside a version of myself I didn't recognize, and the cost of that was becoming clearer than whatever I was trying to find. I deleted the receipt photo from my phone while I was still in bed. Held the delete button, confirmed it, put the phone face down on the nightstand. Then I got up and made coffee and didn't think about gym schedules or LinkedIn or the name Eli while I drank it. The reasoning was simple enough. If something was happening, it would surface eventually without me excavating for it. And if nothing was happening, I was standing in the middle of a good relationship doing damage to it with my own hands. Neither outcome required me to keep going the way I'd been going. For 3 days, it felt like the right call. The watching stopped, and something in me loosened. I came home from work and ate dinner and watched television and went to bed and didn't lie there assembling timelines. It felt genuinely like relief. The fourth night was a Thursday. Claire was in the shower. I was sitting on the bed reading, phone on the nightstand, hers on her side of the bed. Hers buzzed once, and I didn't look up. Buzzed again. Then a third time, 3 in quick succession, the kind of pattern that means it's someone typing fast. I didn't pick it up, but I was close enough that the lock screen preview was visible from where I was sitting. The first message said, "Tuesday still works." The second, same place. The third was one word. My name. Just my name, followed by a question mark. I sat there with the shower running on the other side of the wall and looked at 3 text messages on a lock screen I hadn't touched. Someone had typed my name into a message to Claire like a question, like they were checking on something. Like my name was a variable in a plan they were both managing, something that needed to be accounted for before Tuesday could happen the way they'd arranged it. Which meant whoever was on the other end of that phone knew I existed, knew enough about me, or about Claire's life with me, to ask about me by name. This wasn't something compartmentalized and careless. It had been running long enough and carefully enough that the other person knew what they were working around. Claire came out of the bathroom in a cloud of steam, hair wrapped up, and picked up her phone from the nightstand. I watched her read the messages from the corner of my eye. Her expression didn't change. She typed something back quickly, set the phone face down, and started getting ready for bed like the previous 2 minutes hadn't happened. I said good night when she got into bed. She said good night back. I lay in the dark and listened to her breathing even out and thought about a person typing my name into a message like a question mark, and I understood that the thing I'd spent 3 days trying to walk away from had just walked up and sat down next to me. Claire left at 6:30, gym bag over her shoulder, same as always. I sat in the living room for 20 minutes after the door closed, not thinking about anything in particular, just sitting with the quiet of the house and what I already knew and what I hadn't confirmed yet. Then I got up and walked into the shared office. The laptop was on the desk where it always was, screen down, charging cable running to the wall. I pulled out the chair and sat down and opened it. The login screen came up, that familiar blue-white glow in a room I hadn't turned the light on in. I didn't try the old password. I didn't run through combinations or think about it for long. I typed 4 characters. ELI1. The screen unlocked. I sat there and looked at the desktop. Her desktop, the folders arranged the way she liked them, the wallpaper a photo from a trip we took 2 years ago, everything exactly as it always was. I didn't open the browser. I didn't go through her files or her email or anything she had stored there. I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for evidence anymore. I was looking at it. She had taken the password we'd shared for 3 years. Our cat's name, the year we moved in together, the kind of password that belongs to 2 people, and she had replaced it with his name. She had typed it every morning when she opened this laptop in this house. She had typed it in front of me when she logged me in, body angled toward the screen, so I couldn't see, and she had typed it every night when she closed everything down and came to bed. Every single day, I closed the laptop. I went to the desk drawer and found a notepad and a pen, and I wrote down 3 things. The restaurant name from the receipt I deleted, but still remembered. The date. And the word Eli1 exactly as I typed it. I folded the paper twice and put it in my wallet. Then I opened the laptop again, found the recent login activity in the system settings, and cleared it. She would see no record of the screen having been accessed. I closed it again and sat in the dark office for a while. The feeling I had wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter and more settled than that. I knew what I knew. I had the moment and the method. What I needed now was to choose when and how, and exactly what I wanted the ending of this to look like. I was done discovering things. I was done reacting to information as it arrived. I went back to the living room and turned on the television and waited for her to come home. I'm over it where silence ends. Subscribe if any of this sounds familiar. Saturday morning came the way good mornings do when everything is about to change. Quiet light through the kitchen window, coffee already made, Claire at the table with her phone and her usual unhurried weekend pace. I sat down across from her with my mug and let it be normal for a few minutes. She was scrolling something, half present, the way she was on weekend mornings before the day asked anything of either of us. Then I set my mug down and said I needed to talk to her about something. My voice came out even. I hadn't planned it to sound any particular way. It was just how it came out when you've been carrying something long enough that the carrying becomes the normal state. She looked up. Something in my face made her put her phone down flat on the table without being asked. I'll log into the laptop, I said. Claire's expression didn't move. You changed the password to Eli 1. The silence after that was the kind that has weight. She looked at me, and her mouth opened slightly, just slightly, and then closed without producing anything. She didn't ask how I'd guessed. She didn't say she didn't know what I was talking about. She just sat there, and I watched something shift behind her eyes. Not guilt arriving, but the recognition that the version of events she'd been managing had just stopped being manageable. After a long moment, she said, "It's not what you think. You made his name the key to our life," I said. "You typed it every single day in this house. Don't tell me what I think." She looked at the table. Then she started to cry. Quietly, the way Claire cries, no performance in it. She said it started as a friendship, that she hadn't meant for it to become what it became, that she knew how it looked, but the beginning wasn't what the end looked like. I didn't ask when it started. I said, "I'm asking you to stop lying to me. Right now in this kitchen. Just stop." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She said his name was Eli, that he worked at a different nonprofit across the city, that they'd met at a conference in the fall, and she hadn't known how to stop it once it started moving. "How long?" I said. "For months." I sat with that. For months. The gym evenings. The receipt. The phone face down on the counter. The week of warmth she'd offered after I'd said I felt distance. The Portugal trip planning. The coffee brought to the couch on Saturday mornings. For months of that running underneath. She said she'd been going to tell me. She said she knew she had to tell me. She said she just didn't know how to start that conversation. When I said, "When were you going to tell me?" She didn't answer. She looked at the table again and didn't answer. I stood up. I picked up my coffee. I looked at her for a moment, not with anger, because anger would have required me to still be surprised, and I wasn't surprised anymore. Hadn't been surprised since a lock screen lit up with my own name typed like a question. I walked into the other room and sat down in the chair by the window and drank my coffee. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't needed to. She had chosen a word for the password to our shared life and typed it every day in our shared house for weeks. And when I'd said it back to her, she'd had nothing to put in front of it. Some things don't need volume. I left the house at noon on Saturday. Claire had gone into the bedroom and closed the door, not loudly, just closed it, and I'd sat in the chair by the window for an hour before I got up and packed a bag. Not everything, a few days of clothes, my laptop, my chargers, my documents from the filing cabinet in the office. I didn't take long. I knew what I needed, and I didn't stand in rooms deciding whether to feel something about leaving them. Rob lived 20 minutes away in an apartment on the third floor of a building that smelled like whatever his downstairs neighbor cooked on weekends. He opened the door, looked at the bag on my shoulder, and didn't ask me to explain anything. He got 2 beers from the fridge, handed me one, and we sat on his couch and watched whatever was on television for a couple of hours. At some point, he said, "You okay?" I said I didn't know yet. He nodded, and we kept watching television. That was Rob. He didn't need the story to know what was required, and what was required was a couch and a beer, and someone who wasn't going to make me perform my feelings for their comfort. I slept there Saturday night and most of Sunday and felt hollowed out in a way that was different from sad. Sad would have been easier to locate. Claire called Sunday evening. She said she'd ended things with Eli that morning. She said she knew what she'd done, and she wasn't asking me to forgive it immediately. She just wanted the chance to work through it together. She said she wanted me to come home so they could start figuring out what that looked like. Her voice had the urgency of someone who had spent a day understanding the size of what they'd set in motion. I asked her one question. Did you change the password back? Silence. The laptop, I said. Did you change the password? She said she hadn't touched it. I told her I'd be back Monday to pick up more of my things. She said my name, the way people say it when they want you to stay on the line, and I told her I'd talk to her later and hung up. Monday, I drove back to the house while she was at work. The rooms looked the same as they always did, which was a strange part. Everything sitting where we'd left it, the joint budget spreadsheet still open on the kitchen counter, the Portugal trip still half planned in a browser tab I could see from across the room. I packed 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. My clothes, my books, the few pieces of furniture that had been mine before we moved in together. I took my documents. I left everything that had accumulated in the space between us, the things we'd bought together, the photographs, the objects that had no meaning outside of the context of the two of us. I didn't want to negotiate any of it. I just left it where it was. Before I pulled out of the driveway, I sat in the car and changed every password I had. Bank account, email, everything that had my name on it. Changed each one from my phone, right there in the driveway before I drove away. I didn't leave a note. There wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been said in a quiet kitchen on a Saturday morning over coffee that had gone cold. 5 weeks later, I was living in a sublease on the 2nd floor of a building 3 miles from the house. The apartment was small and mostly empty in the way sublet places are. Someone else's furniture, someone else's idea where things should go, none of it matching much because I wasn't there to build something yet. I was there to land. It was quiet, and it was mine, and that was enough for now. Claire and I handled the logistics over email. 1 thread, maybe 12 messages total, both of us keeping it short and functional. Who held the lease option? Her. How to close the joint accounts, split evenly, done in a week. The cat had never really been a question. Milo had slept on my side of the bed for 4 years. She didn't push it. The conversations were efficient. Not cold exactly, just reduced to what needed to be resolved, which was probably the most honest way we'd communicated in months. My mother called on a Thursday evening. She knew the broad shape of what had happened. I'd told her enough, not everything. She said she was sorry, and she meant it in the plain way she means things, without packaging it into something I was supposed to respond to. She asked if I was eating, not what Claire had done, not her opinion of it, not what I should do next, or how long it would take, or whether I'd thought about talking to someone. Just whether I was eating. I told her yes, and she said good, and we talked for 40 minutes about nothing urgent, and it was the most useful conversation I'd had in weeks. There's a difference between people who want to help you and people who want to be present while you figure it out yourself. My mother has always known which one I need. About a week after that, I set up the laptop. A coworker had sold me his old one. 2 years old, clean, nothing on it. I plugged it in at the kitchen table in the sublease apartment with Milo, sitting on the chair across from me, watching the way cats watch things, like they're deciding whether it's worth caring about. The setup screen ran through its prompts, and then it asked me to create a password. I sat there with the cursor blinking in the field. I typed the cat's name. Just the cat's name. No year attached to it. No number after it. No one else folded into it. 7 letters that meant exactly one thing. I pressed enter, and the screen opened to a blank desktop. No files, no history, no residue of anything that had come before. I looked at it for a moment. Then I opened a browser and started setting things up the way I wanted them. 6 years is a long time to spend building something with someone. I don't know yet what the version after it looks like, but I know what it's built on, and I know who holds the key, and right now that's the part that matters. I'm over it where silence ends. If you've ever had a small detail tell you everything you needed to know, drop in the comments.